Muy buenas tardes a todas y todos. En nombre de la Fundación Educacional Seminarium, quería darles la más cordial bienvenida a esta nueva charla online a un clic, que es la primera que hacemos en este formato más cercano, más especial, quería decirlo así, digamos, porque es mucho más cercano y nos permite una mayor interacción entre todas y todos nosotros. De a poco va aumentando la cantidad de gente. Teníamos prácticamente 300 personas inscritas para este evento, así que de a poco se van sumando. Pueden ver ahí cómo aumenta la cantidad de participantes. Pero nada, quería darles de verdad la más cordial bienvenida de nuevo a este espacio que estamos organizando por primera vez, únicamente el equipo de la Fundación Educacional Seminarium para todas y todos ustedes, e insisto, en un formato distinto, en un formato más cercano, que nos permite una mayor interacción y que esperamos también que para ustedes sea también más simple el uso, mucho más, digamos, eh, más conocido, digamos, porque muchos de ustedes seguramente hacen clases en esta misma plataforma. Así que de verdad, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Esperamos que este sea también un espacio de encontrarnos, y como también de comprender y desarrollar nuevas competencias, nuevos conocimientos más bien, para efectos de seguir avanzando hacia la educación que queremos todas y todos, que necesitamos en este siglo XXI. Como decíamos en la invitación a este espacio, en nuestras comunidades educativas ocurre comúnmente que existe una brecha entre lo que nosotros valoramos y lo que realmente medimos. Por ejemplo, nosotros normalmente necesitamos y sabemos la importancia que tiene dar retroalimentación, pero luego solamente nos preocupamos, o solemos, no digo todas ni todos, pero solemos preocuparnos de las veces que dimos feedback, pero no necesariamente del impacto y los resultados que nos permitió o que obtuvimos de parte de nuestros estudiantes al minuto de desarrollar ese feedback. O sea, qué consecuencias tuvo ese feedback en el proceso de aprendizaje de nuestras y nuestros estudiantes. Entonces, lo importante ahí es poder evaluar lo otro. Y lo que queremos es justamente poder enfocarnos en eso que realmente nos importa, que tiene que ver con ese impacto que tuvo ese feedback, esa retroalimentación que le dimos a nuestros estudiantes. No cuántas veces lo hice, sino que los resultados que está obteniendo eso. Entonces, para eso, hoy invitamos a James Nottingham. Él es creador del Learning Pit, que es un marco de planificación de lecciones que ilustra sobre cómo pasar de un conocimiento superficial a una comprensión profunda, a través de saber, en el fondo, de entender cuándo, cómo y por qué desafiar de manera adecuada a las y los estudiantes, fomentar sus competencias socioemocionales mediante la colaboración entre ellos, como también enseñar habilidades de razonamiento, entre otras habilidades, digamos. Él, James, además es cofundador del Challenging Learning, que es una organización que está presente en más de 6 países, entre los que están Reino Unido, Estados Unidos, Australia, Dinamarca, Noruega. De hecho, James en este instante se encuentra en Inglaterra, en el borde con Escocia. Así que muchas gracias ahí a James. Tiene 4 horas más, son las 7 de la tarde allá, así que le agradecemos también este esfuerzo que está haciendo por estar con nosotros. Pero la organización que él lidera y que cofundó, el Challenging Learning, se enfoca en llevar a cabo asesorías a comunidades educativas para que logren trabajar en conjunto por el cumplimiento de las metas que tienen. Muchas veces se nos da que tenemos metas, pero no necesariamente estamos lográndolas, y digamos, cómo nosotros nos reunimos como comunidad para poder hacerlo, eso es a lo que se encarga, digamos, la organización de la cual James es cofundador. Adicionalmente, James es autor de 11 libros sobre enseñanza, aprendizaje y liderazgo, entre los que se encuentran además varios bestsellers, como Challenging Learning, Encouraging Learning y The Learning Challenge. Su trabajo, además, lo ha llevado a ser reconocido por el Swedish School Union como una de las personas más importantes en educación, como también uno de los innovadores más brillantes en el Reino Unido, según el diario The Observer. Así que un currículum, la verdad, muy importante, muy destacado, digamos, en nuestra área, que es la educación, y por eso es que lo quisimos invitar no solo a esta charla online a un clic, sino que también a nuestro seminario de enseñanza efectiva que vamos a estar desarrollando durante el próximo jueves 21 de octubre, y él va a estar además junto a Charlotte Danielson, quien es una reconocida especialista en educación a nivel internacional por su conocimiento y trabajo en el área de eficacia docente, como también es fundadora del marco de instrucción educativo más usado en Estados Unidos, digamos, en los 45 estados en ese país, como también en otros países como Canadá, Colombia, España y además Chile. La mayoría de nosotros que estamos aquí somos de Chile, por eso lo destaco. Como siempre, desde ya los invitamos y las invitamos a enviar consultas. Aprovechemos este espacio más cercano, más íntimo, si se quiere, para enviar consultas y conectarnos con James Nottingham, quien nos acompaña hoy. Y cómo hacerlo, tan solo tienen que enviar sus preguntas a través del chat y nosotros vamos a estar leyéndolas al término de su presentación, ¿ya? Así que desde ya las y los invitamos a decirnos de dónde son y enviarnos de qué escuelas, a dónde pertenecen, de qué ciudades, de qué países, pero también a enviarnos sus consultas para que podamos leerlas y transmitírselas a James para que hagamos de este un espacio de aprendizaje para todas y todos, ¿ya?
To make
Así
this
que,
a space for learning for all. So without further ado, and after this introduction, we hand the floor to James Nottingham, who we welcome. And he asked us to tell you that when he is presenting, what he would like if you could see his expression, to see him himself. So you can see him present. And with that in mind, we invite you that when he is presenting his PowerPoint, you can enlarge his image. Now, how to do this? When he starts to share his screen, if you place your cursor between the slide and the camera, you'll see a barrier, and you can move and drag that barrier, that line, and that'll allow you to enlarge his video feed. In addition, we have people also from Lima, from Peru, joining. So, moreover, to hear in Spanish James's presentation, you have to go to the invitation option in the Zoom screen and select the Spanish channel. But we have an issue that we're solving. So, but there were some technical difficulties, but now everything has been sorted out. These are things that happen in with live presentations. So James, if you could turn on your camera now, your video feed. There you are, James. Well, we can see you. And just to remind you, when he starts to present, if you could can enlarge his video to see him larger, so you can see him presenting and see his expressions and understand in a better way his message. I've extended myself a bit more, but we welcome you now, and so you can give your presentation.
Muchas gracias, Edmundo, y buenas tardes a todos. I'm very sorry that that is the limit of my Spanish, so I'm going to present to you in English, but I hope you forgive me. Maybe it will help you to know that I'm encouraging my 3 children to learn Spanish right now, and my 15-year-old is very good at it, and she's learning South American Spanish, none of that Castilian stuff, but like proper Spanish. So hopefully she can be my translator when I come and see you all. I'm going to share my slide now, and hopefully you can see an image of the learning bit. Okay, thumbs up from Edmundo. Don't worry about the text in the bubbles, because this is just to give you a sense of what the learning pit looks like, and then I'm going to give you much more detail about it and what it means and why it is a really good way to encourage your students to step out of their comfort zone, to encourage your colleagues and to encourage yourself to step out of their comfort zone. When I trained to be a teacher, I did a lot of study of Lev Vygotsky's work. And as you can see from this quote, I mean, he wrote a lot about the zone of proximal development and social construction. But if you see this quote, that Vygotsky said that how we react to things is arguably more influential than the knowledge we share. What we show joy with, what we show anger with, what we show pleasure with, what we show disdain for, that influences our young people in very, very, very many ways. And one aspect of that I'm particularly worried about is how we respond to students who succeed and students who fail. All too often, I think we are very, very, very quick to praise the children who win, who succeed, who get 10 out of 10, even if that success is being with something very easy. And I wonder what that is doing to children's beliefs about learning. I wonder if lots and lots of students are thinking learning is all about getting it right. Learning is all about getting 10 out of 10, or finishing quickly, or being better than everyone else. I wonder if lots of students think that. And the problem is, lots of students will then think, I will pick the easy option. I'll go for the thing that I know I can do. Because if I do something that I'm good at, that I know I can complete quickly, then the adults are going to praise me. The problem also is, I think we are very quick to console or even rescue the students who are struggling in some way, or they get 5 out of 10. Now, let me say this to you. Edmundo, let's say you and I take a test in Spanish. I expect, Edmundo, that you will get 20 out of 20, and I will be disappointed if you don't. I expect that Carmen and I will get maybe 2 out of 10, and that's only if the words in Spanish are very similar to the words in English, like perfecto. I think we can probably work that one out. But in school, far too often, if you get 20 out of 20, you get praised for it, even if it's really easy for you. And if I get 6 out of 10, we are told that we need to work harder, or we need to concentrate more, or we feel bad because our friends look at us and think he or she doesn't know it. And you might think, okay, this is great, this is easy. All I have to do is do the things I know I can do. And I can do them very, very well. And I get praised for it. And I get told I'm clever. I get told I'm brilliant. And that might feel nice to begin with. But the problem comes when students face difficulties, when they face problems that they don't know how to solve. In fact, I think all too often we are creating risk-averse students we're trying to wrap them up in bubble wrap to protect them as much as we can. In this country, we call parents who do this helicopter parents. These are the parents who hover above, making sure that their children are safe, making sure their children get everything right, making sure that their little darlings are succeeded. succeeding. In Japan, and we do quite a lot of work in Japan, these same parents are called bonsai parents. You know, the little trees, and they're clipping them very carefully, making sure that everything's okay. In Scandinavia, where we work a lot, they call them curling parents. You know, the Winter Olympic sport of curling, where you throw the rock and then the athletes are sweeping the ice to help the ice be much smoother. These are the terms we use for parents who are overprotective of their children. But I wonder whether teachers are falling into the same trap. I wonder whether what is going on is we are doing the same thing in the classroom. We are making sure that students don't fail. We are making things easier for our students. We are hovering above our students, checking that they are okay, checking to make sure they're doing everything right. And yet we know that the best things happen when we step out of our comfort zone. That's where the magic happens. In fact, is also where learning happens. Students have to step out of their comfort zone to learn. We have to step out of our comfort zone to learn. And all too often, I think what we are doing as adults is keeping the children in their comfort zone. We're working out, what are they good at? What do they understand? What can they do? And we get them to do that. And when they succeed, we praise them and we say, very good, well done. Whereas what Carmen and I are doing in our work is thinking, how can we flip this? How can we change this? So actually what we're doing is praising students when they are out of their comfort zone. What can we do so that we encourage students to go beyond what they are capable of right now? In other words, what can we do to make sure that, going back to that quote from Vygotsky, that we react to the right things? We react to students learning, rather than succeeding easily. We react to students trying hard. We react to students thinking. We react to students asking questions. We react to students being determined and resilient, rather than all the time praising them when they get it right and rescuing them when they get it wrong. So that's the basis. That's where I'm coming from. This is what I was trying to convey to my students. I wanted them to know that together we should step out of our comfort zone. In school, we should step out of our comfort zone. We should support and encourage each other to try new and different things. We should be more curious, more collaborative, more thoughtful. We should take intellectual risks. We should try the same thing, but in a different way, or with different people, to see what else we can discover. Now, I tried lots of different ways to encourage my students to do this. And I told you I was a student of Lev Vygotsky's work. I very much appreciated his work, this idea of social construction, his idea of the zone of proximal development. And I tried that. I said, listen, students, if you stay in your comfort zone, you will not learn. We have to step out of our comfort zone into the zone of proximal development. That's that green area here. Now, we don't want to go beyond that because then we start to fail and feel bad, but we need to go beyond where we are right now. But when I talked about this, my students were like, who was Vygotsky or the zone of proximal what? It didn't really work for my students. So I had to think of a different way. I also wanted my students to know that learning often means you get worse before you get better. I said to them, listen, what often happens is when you start out, you think, well, I know a little bit about this, or I can do this a little bit. And it feels quite nice. Yes, I know a little bit of, let's say I know a few words in Spanish. Okay, I can speak a few words in Spanish. This is nice. I can count to 10. I can count to 20. I can say good morning. I could say good afternoon. I can say my name is. I can speak a few words of Spanish. That feels nice. But if I'm actually properly going to learn Spanish, what will happen is I will realize very, very quickly that it's much more complicated than I thought it was. And I mean, Carmen and I were smiling at each other when we were listening to Edmundo talk with some of his colleagues, because, you know, maybe we can recognize some Spanish words, but when you speak Edmundo, it's just like, oh my God, you speak so quickly. You know, it's really complicated. It's really hard to listen to somebody speaking Spanish because you speak so quickly. So we've gone from knowing a few words, thinking, okay, I can do this, you know, practicing some things in Spanish lessons, to then visiting Santiago and realizing that everybody speaks really quickly and everybody uses colloquial words. And we're like, wow, this is really hard. So we get worse before then we get better. And I said to my students, here is what happens. You get worse before you get better. Don't worry. That's not bad news. This is just reality. This is the truth. We often get worse before we get better. During lockdown, I said to my children, let's have a go at playing golf in the garden. And we just got a few golf clubs and we tried hitting them and so on. And we did okay. You know, we were able to hit the ball. I mean, not very far, but anyway, we were able to hit the ball. And it was great. And we did really weird ways of doing it and so on, but we did okay. So that was the start. But then my brother-in-law came to visit after lockdown finished. And he's an expert golfer. I mean, his handicap is +1. I mean, he's just insanely good. And he took a look at what we were doing and he said, I'm going to have to teach you to undo all of those bad habits. Let me show you some techniques. So he got us holding the golf club properly and got us standing properly and getting our head over the ball, and he got us bending our elbows and so on. And you know what? We got worse. We stopped hitting the ball because he was teaching us a proper technique, and we got worse. But we had to then say to ourselves, don't worry, this is normal. Uncle Gary, as the children call him, he's not trying to make us worse, he's trying to make us better. But the problem is, very often we will get worse before we get better. And when I presented this to my students, one of them said, well, it looks a bit like a pit. And so the learning pit was born. And with my own children in the summer, we said to each other, this is it, we're going through the learning pit. This is normal. It's normal to get worse before you get better. It is okay. We can expect that. And that's why the learning pit became successful for my students, and then for many others as well, because it reassured them. It said, listen, it's not weird, it's not bad that things are getting worse before they get better. It's normal. So let's stick together. Let's keep going and we'll get there. Now, the learning pit in my own classroom on the board looked like that. You know, it's just like, whoop. Now, once Carmen and I and our colleagues, we've got some pretty good designers in our team. And now look, it looks a whole lot more beautiful. Now, I realize you probably can't read the text there because it's quite small, but the first character is saying, I think I know the answer. So that's the first one on the left-hand side. And then the next one saying, this is not as easy as I thought. And then they're getting into the pit, I'm confused. But as they're coming out of the pit, they're saying, I need to work hard at this. I think I'm getting it. I understand it at last. So it's that sense of a journey through what we call the learning pit. It's that sense of progress. It's that sense of development together. Now, for those of you who are interested, I first shared this with my students in the early 2000s, and then I shared it at some teacher conferences. And it took me some years to write about it, but I wrote an article about it in 2007. That's the first time it was ever in print. And then I wrote my first book in 2010, and that introduced the learning pit to everyone. And then since then, I've written an in-depth book, The Learning Challenge, and then a shorter guide. That's the one with the blue cover. And as you can see, it's available in Spanish. It's also available in lots of different languages, Dutch and Swedish and Danish and Norwegian and all sorts of different languages. We also have posters to go with it as well. Professors from around the world are writing about the learning pit as well, including it in their work. Guy Claxton, you might have heard of him with Building Learning Power. He uses the learning pit. Jo Boaler from Stanford University, she uses the learning pit. The learning pit looks like this. It is this idea of getting worse before we get better. For me, there are three main reasons why you would be in the pit. Number one, sometimes you find yourself in the pit. The world pandemic, that has put us all in the learning pit. We've all had to learn how to teach very differently. We've had to learn all of this communication Zoom idea. We've had to learn how to teach students with masks over our faces. We've had to learn how to shop differently and socialize differently and live differently. So we've all found ourselves in the learning pit. Sometimes, therefore, we're in the learning pit when we didn't want to, when we were pushed into there through no choice of our own. Because of that, I think as a teacher, we should help students to practice being in the learning pit. We should guide our students into the learning pit. We should find lessons and activities and tasks that we can do with our students that will help them get used to being in the learning pit. Because the more they are used to being in the learning pit, the more they will be able to deal with being in the learning pit when they find themselves there through no fault of their own. The next time a pandemic hits, I bet we'll be more ready for it. The next time a student struggles and fails, they'll be more ready for it because they've got experience of it. The next time students are working with other students that they really don't like and they don't know how to get on with, they'll be able to do it better because they're more used to it. That's the idea of the learning pit. Practicing learning, getting used to learning so that we get much, much, much better at learning. So sometimes we find ourselves there. Sometimes, and this is what Carmen and I write about and present and speak about, is we should be purposefully taking students into the learning pit often so that they rehearse, so that they practice, so that they get better at it. And then finally, what you will find is students will choose to be in the learning pit. They will think to themselves, well, it's boring being in the comfort zone. I want to be out of the comfort zone. I want to be over there working out what else I can do. I want to try different things. I want to have a go at lots of new things that I've never tried before and see how I get on with it. I want to make progress. Now, part of this is to do with resilience. You see, if I go back to what I talked about here, I think one of the big problems with curling parents or helicopter parents is we make our children less resilient, less determined, less engaged, because many parents, and I would say many teachers, are making things too easy for their children. They're trying to protect them all the time. And of course, I want to protect my own children, but I don't want to protect them to the point that they rely on me all the time. I don't want to protect them to the point that they are wrapped in bubble wrap and never experience the world. I want them to experience the world so that they have a much better opportunity to live and engage in that world. That's the idea behind this. And so what I'm looking to do is, how can I take them out of their comfort zone, take them to this area where the magic happens, and what I call the learning pit. And when we do that, we build resilience. Now, I don't know if resilience translates very easily into Spanish or not. I know that it doesn't translate in quite a lot of different languages. So I'm hoping that resilience is something that works in Spanish. But when I say resilience, I mean that determination, that ability to keep going and going and going, even though you get knocked back lots of times. It's that ability to be able to deal with failure, deal with problems, to keep focused. That's what I mean by resilience. Now, PISA, I don't know if that's something that you talk a lot about in Chile, but Chile takes part in the PISA study, and every 3 years, there are some 15-year-olds in Chile who take a test to see how well they are doing in language, literature, and maths. And the same happens in the USA, where Carmen is. The same happens here in the UK, where I am. The same happens in 64 countries around the world. And then the PISA team, they compare different countries and see how the students are doing. One of the measures that they look at is how resilient are students. And the way they test that is they put some questions in the test that are impossible to solve. They cannot be solved. And then they look to see, do the students keep going? Are they resilient enough to still keep going, to be determined, to try and try and try? And I'm sorry to report, students in Chile do not do very well at all. Apparently, students in Chile are not very resilient. Now, Edmundo, I hope you're not going to disconnect me right now for saying such a thing, but let me share the results with you. And I'm sorry it's in English. Edmundo, this was a last-minute entry, so I should have sent it to you for translation, but hopefully you forgive me. Right, so everybody tip your head on the side right now so that you can read all and everybody, I know what you're doing. You're scanning for Chile right now, aren't you? Well, let me very quickly show you. The OECD average is there, where that blue arrow, and Chile is all the way down here, sandwiched between Costa Rica and you're better than Colombia. I mean, you know, come on. You're better than Colombia. You're better than Peru. So, all right, you're not the worst. But look at this. Go over to the green area. More than 40% of their students kept going. In fact, in Shanghai, China, 76% of students kept going. Whereas in Chile, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's about 7% of students kept going. Now, this was in 2018, so maybe students in Chile are more resilient these days, or maybe they're not. This is one part of being in the learning pit, is the more you learn how to struggle, the more you practice being out of your comfort zone, the more resilient you become. You see, I would love it if my children didn't have to be resilient. I would love it if they lived in a world where everything was easy and you didn't have to be resilient. But I know that's simply not the case. I know that there's always going to be problems. They're always going to face things that they can't solve. They're always going to meet people that they just can't get on with. They're always going to face problems at school and then later in work that they just don't know how to do. And so I want them to keep sticking at it, to keep being determined, to keep being resilient. And so one of the reasons to take students through the learning pit many times is to help them build resilience. Okay, I'm going to pause there because next week I'm going to go into this in much more detail and give lots and lots of examples. And I want to stop because I want to give time for questions. But let me finish this part anyway by just sharing with you some examples of some learning pits around the world. The one at the top left, that comes from one of the schools that Carmen's been working with. I think, in fact, that might even be in your region, Carmen. And then there's some beautiful murals underneath that. I mean, some students are making their own learning pits. Some the teachers are making. On our website, we've got lots of graphics that you can download. I particularly like the one in the top right. This is from New Zealand. And this is where they've superimposed the maths problems that the students are working on over the top of the learning pit so that they've got a sense of what they're doing. But anyway, listen, that's enough of an introduction. That gives you enough of a background to the learning pit. I'm going to talk about it lots more next week. And I hope that Carmen will be able to join us for that as well. She's been unusually quiet. In fact, this is the longest I've known Carmen to say nothing in probably her entire life. I think she came out, she was born talking, and she's got a doctorate in talking, actually. So it's amazing that we've worked out how to stop her talking. But hopefully she'll join us as well in this Q&A. And she's got fabulous things to share about how it works in practice as well. So let me stop sharing that. And over to you, Edmundo and Carmen, for questions.
So I'll go ahead and jump in. I wasn't going to jump in before. You were on a roll.
Surprise, surprise.
A lot to say in a short period of time. But I think one of the biggest things that I like to share with educators, having heard James talk about this, and when he talked at the beginning about the the curling parents and the helicopter parents, and how we as educators often jump in to save the students or be the rescuers. And so often you go into schools and you talk to educators, and we all say that we want our children to be challenged, that we want them to be resilient, that we want them to be able to engage with challenge. But then when we actually get to it, as soon as they show emotion, like if they'll cry or they'll be upset, we just stop and then we save them. And so much of what we do, and James kind of alluded to this, is helping educators to build that culture. Too often people will see the learning pit, try it, say that it doesn't work because their kids, struggled or cried or gave up or, didn't want to battle through. But it is all about creating that culture that will allow for that to be okay and for that to happen.
Yes.
So it's a good thing for educators who are just getting into this to know that it's not going to be perfect tomorrow for sure.
No, it's all part of, absolutely right, Carmen. It's all part of supporting, but also creating the culture. And I know we're moving to questions, Edmundo, and there is one question in the chat in English. So the learning pit is for all grades of education, even for preschoolers. Yes, is the quick answer. In fact, we do a lot of work with preschoolers around the world. We've been running lots of projects in Scandinavia with preschoolers, and their preschools go from 9 months old to 6 years old. and those children. They even have big learning pits as mats on the floor, and the children go and sit in the learning pit, and it's lovely. So it works for everybody. Yeah, it's just a way to talk about challenge in a student-friendly or child-friendly way.
Muchas gracias, James, Carmen.
So thank you,
Donada.
James, Carmen. You knew more Spanish than you were hinting.
No, that's it.
So Carmen, James, thank you very much. There are some questions that we're receiving through the chat. In these minutes, we incentivize people to continue to send you questions in Spanish or English. There are no issues. The only one who will have problems will be the interpreter, because he's interpreting simultaneously Spanish to English and English to Spanish. So we thank. Oh, well, thank you very much. So, Carmen and James, there's the following question. In the learning pit that you're describing, there are, I imagine, many students that feel things, emotions, when they fall into the pit. Frustration, fear, I don't know. There can be different emotions that arise by simply leaving the comfort zone triggers these emotions, right? How can educators can support them from a socio-emotional standpoint, so they are able to overcome these emotions and to become more resilient?
Yeah. So number one is you don't push the children into the learning pit. You go in the learning pit with them. You make this a collaborative thing. As a teacher, you say, I'm confused. I'm in the learning pit. Can you help me? So you take that very Socratic approach of, I'm confused, I don't understand, could you give me more information? Could we think of an example? So you go into the learning pit with the students. You make it collaborative. Also, you think about it in terms of, let's say, well, Carmen and I, we share a passion for swimming, and Carmen's got 3 children, I've got 3 children, all 6 of them are swimmers. If we were to take children who didn't swim to the swimming pool, we wouldn't throw them in the swimming pool and let them get on with it. We would build it up bit by bit by bit. We would get in the pool with them. We would do some gentle exercises first, some little routines first, and we would visit the swimming pool every day. And bit by bit by bit, we'd do a bit more and a bit more and a bit more and a bit more, so that eventually they love to be in the pool and they don't need us anymore, and they're trying lots of things by themselves. But we're going to have to build it up bit by bit by bit, and that's really important. I think the third thing is that actually what we have found is the students who are most hesitant to go in the learning pit are often the ones who normally succeed at school.
Yeah.
Because they're not used to being in the learning pit. And actually, it's the students who normally struggle, who normally find it a problem, who think, well, of course, this is the learning pit, you know? I mean, I met an ex-student of mine, and we got chatting, and I said, you know, what was school like for you? I mean, he he's grown up by this stage, and he said, oh, I hated school. And I said, oh, why did he hate school? He said, well, you know that learning pit that you taught us about? He said, I spent my life in that learning pit. The teachers would start teaching, I would get confused, I would get in the learning pit, and then the teachers would say, so, moving on then. He said, I used to think, what do you mean moving on? I'm still in the pit. And I said to him, so does that mean you hated all of school? And he said, no, I loved the times that you got us all in the learning pit. And I said, but I thought you said you didn't like being in the learning pit. He said, no, I didn't like to be left in the learning pit by myself. But when everybody was in the learning pit with me, I used to think, welcome to my world. Can I show you around? Can I get you a drink? And he was so used to dealing with being in the learning pit, he helped everybody else. And together, they climbed out of the learning pit with me. And it's really important that this is a collaborative thing together.
I think I'm just going to add in super quick. The other piece that's so important is to ensure that there are no consequences for students to be in the learning pit or to take those risks, whether perceived or actual. So no grades that are going to be affected, not being left there alone, not being held back from the exciting things that they can learn about. So really important to be cognizant of.
Yes. Yeah. Edmundo, there's a question from Maria in English, and I know I shouldn't give preference just to the people who are writing in English.
Iba a leer la misma.
Okay, just whilst you are looking at which ones to translate.
So they were actually going
me,
to read that question.
But parents sometimes help to stay in the comfort zone because they want their children to be successful. How can we motivate them to keep out of that zone? Lots and lots of things. Number one, talk to the parents about why you're trying to get the students through the learning pit, what the point is, what the purpose is, what the children will gain from it. Number two is when you speak to the parents, talk to them about progress, talk to them about learning behaviors, talk to them about how impressed you are with their child for being determined and focused and curious and engaged. So in other words, remember that Vygotsky quote, what you focus on, what you praise, what you draw attention to becomes very, very important. So when you are talking with parents, don't talk about grades, don't talk about success, even if they ask for it. Talk about learning behaviors, talk about curiosity, talk about progress. When a parent asks me, how is my child doing in relation to everyone else? I always reply with, your child is doing better than your child was 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. So always reply in terms of progress rather than that competition. I mean, that's a tiny part of the story. There's, as you can imagine, a lot of examples that we could give, but I'll try and give some more next week. But hopefully that's enough to start with. Edmundo, questions to translate for us?
Segura, sí. Sí, hay otra.
Yes, for sure. But in Spanish. So we're going to trigger the interpretation. The next one is from Peru. Our friends from Peru. And Peru was also including in the PISA ranking that you showed, from Denise Soto. She asks, she says that it's very interesting, the fundamentals and the action plan for the learning pit. And she asks, and correct me if I'm mistaken, Denise, but I understand that the question is, how is this applied to special needs students? Mm-hmm. Denise, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the question is if this, if the learning pit is applicable to special needs students.
Yes, it is. That's the quick answer. It depends what we mean by special needs. And of course, I realize there is a massive range here, but think back to the swimming pool example. You have special needs students going into the swimming pool. So you've got disabled in terms of their body is disabled, and you're going to have to think about the way in which you're going to help them. It might be that they've got a cognitive disability that we have to take account of. It might be a communication issue. So it's just the same with the learning pit. So you, with students with communication disabilities, then you will find like photographs and images and objects will help very much with that. With students who, let's say, they don't speak Spanish, they speak something else at home, and so it's that multilingual classroom, then actually one of the best ways to learn the language is to be immersed in it and hear other children using it and explaining it in lots of ways. So as a teacher taking students through the pit, I ask a question, but when a child answers, I don't say, yes, very good, Edmundo. I say, could you give us another example? Do you think that always works? Or could you give a reason? And when you speak more, Edmundo, then the kids who don't speak Spanish very much are listening to you. And they're hearing more Spanish from someone of their similar age and similar cognitive ability. And so they're hearing that pattern of speech different from the teacher. And so actually it's this immersion that is so very, very powerful. Another way to do it is where, and we've done it where we've got lots of deaf children in the group. So you have some children in the inner circle and some students on the outer circle, and those in the circle are talking whilst those on the outer circle are writing down ideas, and then you've got some sign support for the students, and then they swap over. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of different ways, and of course it depends what we mean by special needs. If, for example, they are on the autistic spectrum and they struggle to hold two competing thoughts in their mind at the same time, then we have to be very, very aware of that and very supportive of that, and realize that this is about helping them to be very clear about one idea and to compare that. Whereas with shall we say, the average, if we can call it average student, what we're trying to do is get them to hold both ideas at the same time. With others, it's just one. You know, that I've just seen how can I teach the learning pit if I've got 22 students with different levels? Well, I mean, I don't remember ever having a class of students less than 35 in my class, you know, and you just got to have, and you've got all that range, and it's learning together and it's challenging and questioning. And being in the learning pit doesn't mean to say that every single student is speaking either. You know, there's so many different ways to do this.
I think the learning pit is actually best with, you know, kids at a lot of different levels, because you can get kids into the pit on the same concept and yet have a very different journey through the pit. And, you know, they're building off of one another's ideas. So, yeah, I mean, lots of levels actually works extremely well.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember, the learning pit is about exploration. It's about examples. It's about reasoning. It's about explanation. It's not about right or wrong. So let me give you an example. If I say, what is the capital of Chile? Okay, Santiago de Chile. All right, so we got the answer. The learning pit's not about that. The learning pit is, what is a capital city? Oh, well, it's the biggest city. Okay, well, in Chile, that is correct, but it's not in the USA. Washington, D.C. is not the biggest. It's not in Canada, that's Ottawa. I mean, that's not the biggest. It's not in Scotland, Edinburgh, that's not the biggest city. You know, so well, what is a capital city? Well, it's about the most important. Well, important in what way? If you go to New Zealand, Auckland, it has half of the whole country's population in Auckland, and it's not even the capital. So are you saying Auckland's not the most important city? Well, no, but it's the most historical then. Well, what do you mean by historical? You know, because Washington, D.C. is not very historical, you know, by comparison to other cities in the US. So, and what we're trying to do is explore. And that's the point. That's why Carmen says that actually it makes it more interesting when you've got lots of different levels, because it's not about get the facts. It's about explore, reason, examples, counterexamples, questions, wondering, explaining to others. That's why it actually works so much better when it's a mixed group. And in fact, what we will often do is say, right, let's have some fifth graders, fourth graders, third graders, and second graders in one group together. Or we'll have some 7, 8, 9, 10th graders all together, because we'll see where we go.
James, Carmen, esta instancia.
So James, Carmen, these moments are always short, too short. We would love to have more time, but in this moment, but we're going to have more time, of course, next Thursday.
We are
at our seminar together with Charlotte Daniels, where James will be with us, and apparently Carmen also will be joining. So we can coordinate that and arrange that. I'm happy to have Carmen too. We had people from all around Chile, from the north, center, south, people from Peru, from Argentina, from San Juan. So thank you, everybody. And we hope you can enter www.fundacionseminarium.com to find out more about the Effective Learning Seminar, Effective. Again, thank you very much, James and Carmen, and see you on Thursday.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Hasta la vista.
Bye.
I learned it all from the Terminator.
Thank you.
Chao, chao, gracias.
Bye-bye.